Saudi Arabia is overhauling its government following Jamal Khashoggi's murder. King Salman has appointed new ministers and security officials, but he made sure that his son, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, maintained a firm grip on power.
The shakeup targets Saudi Arabia's Supreme Council. It oversees the country's top security issues. For more on this, let's bring in Behnam Ben Taleblu. He's a research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Behnam, I hope I got your name right.
Well done, yes.
Yeah, you
good to be with you,
all right, excellent. Good to see you.
Likewise, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, my friend. So why is this cabinet shakeup so significant, and what are the biggest takeaways here?
Great. So there's actually two important reasons. One, of course, is that I know these moves in the cabinet, actually changing the cabinet, appear mandated every 4 years. And the second, of course, is the political timeline. This is the first major domestic political move after the indictments you mentioned and after the entire Khashoggi affair in 2018. And this matters because Saudi Arabia is both signaling resolve and compromise. Resolve to the international community because there was that Senate resolution, and compromise because, of course, they do want to be seen as a key player in the international community. And so the cabinet today balances some of the old-timers and newer guys who are actually fans and friends of MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince.
And yet the Crown Prince maintains his grip on power. So will anything really change?
Well, that's actually very important to note because there was a lot of speculation in Washington in October and November, and even before the cabinet shakeup in late December, that the Crown Prince would be dispossessed of key advisors if there was a cabinet shakeup, or that the Crown Prince's power could be circumscribed by King Salman, who issued the cabinet reshuffle. That has all proven, I think, to be way too premature. MBS retains key allies and has able to move some of those allies into lateral positions and keep his own portfolio, such as the Defense Ministry, Deputy Prime Ministership, as well as influence over parts of the economy.
What I find really fascinating, Behnam, is that the Crown Prince has not succeeded in doing anything, at least to the eyes of those of us in the West, right. The Saudi Arabia has long been accused of human rights violations, long before this Jamal Khashoggi incident. But now you've got the war in Yemen. You've got the incident in Qatar. You've got the incident with the Lebanese government official. Everything that he seems to attempt to do seems to go awry. And so why has the king chosen him as the successor?
Well, I think that's very interesting because it didn't start out that way.
I know.
Right? Behnam, you could talk about how it certainly seemed like he was embraced here in this country by titans of industry, by politicians. When he said that he was going to lift the ban on women driving, everyone celebrated.
There was this media narrative that I'm sure the Saudis helped to propagate, which is that, he's this sort of, new crown prince for the 21st century, reformer. But it all seems to me now that it was a lot of propaganda, and sadly, a lot of those in the media bought into that.
Listen, there are both problems and prospects with any Middle Eastern reformer, whether they're from a conservative monarchy or a more radical left-leaning republic. We saw this during the Cold War with allies and adversaries of the U.S., and I think Saudi Arabia is no exception to that rule here. Yes, Saudi Arabia has emerged from its much more conservative stance in foreign and security policy to be much more heavy-handed, and in addition to all the spats you mentioned, I would add the significant spat with Canada, which happened quite in public and over Twitter. But I think the Saudi government and the Saudi cabinet now wants to push past that, perhaps rebalance, reassess. And I think that is one reason for the demotion of Jubair and bringing in someone with, I think, less diplomatic experience, but again, a loyalist like Al-Assaf to be the new foreign minister. And actually, this shows an intention to kind of rebalance again. So get rid of some old faces, move forward some new faces, and start 2019 on a different footing. But again, everything you mentioned, those are the prospects and the perils of any Middle Eastern reformer, particularly from a country like Saudi Arabia.
And I know it's going to be difficult for you to weigh in on this. Vlad mentioned the war in Yemen. We've done many stories here at CBS News about the humanitarian crisis there. Intentions are fine, but could we see Saudi Arabia move past intentions and actually take action to resolve this or stop the humanitarian crisis?
Listen, I think the Saudis see behind the Houthis, which are, as we know, materially and politically supported by Iran, malign Iranian intentions. The Saudis, of course, are reeling from the fact that there was the JCPOA nuclear deal with Iran in 2015 that gave Iran cash to extend its hand in the region. And so part of this Saudi resurgence has been to check, of course, a rising Iran. But now without the Iran deal and with the Trump administration muddling between tough sanctions but not appearing tough on Iran in the region, Saudi Arabia may actually not feel inclined to relent on the war in Yemen or, of course, on any other proxy conflict with Iran. So I think on that dynamic alone, intentions and capabilities for Saudi Arabia are matched, and they appear to want to step up and continue to check Iran.
So how do you see the relationship with the United States and the kingdom morphing as a new Congress takes control?
Perhaps the Saudis may, again, because of this different dynamic in the cabinet, show a little bit more signs of compromise. But again, there's also every sign of compromise would be tempered by a signal of resolve. So I think, yes, they want to eschew any notion that the Crown Prince was involved, but they want to push past that. And I think there's any opportunity there, it could be on cooperation over things like missile defense or Persian Gulf security.
Here's the thing about we've got, the Democrats taking over the House. Is that even prior to this, Congress was firmly and vocally critical of Saudi Arabia, right?
Not bipartisan.
Right, exactly.
That's right.
So if we didn't see them budge prior to today, I don't know if we'll see them budge after.
It's so funny, Emery, you read my mind, because the question that I was going to ask you, Behnam, is if it had been a different president, not President Trump, a president who, in the wake of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, came out really tough on Saudi Arabia, what would that have looked like? Because that could still happen, years down the road. I mean, President Trump is probably running for re-election, but he may lose that re-election. And I'm just curious, if it had been another kind of president who did not sort of agree with the Crown Prince's assessment that he had nothing to do with it, what would that have looked like?
It's an excellent question and an interesting counterfactual to entertain, but I would just push back a little bit because there has been a mismatch between rhetoric and reality from the administration on Saudi Arabia. Yes, the rhetoric was muddled through, as you mentioned, but the reality is that we've issued economic penalties, Magnitsky sanctions in particular, against select individuals in Saudi Arabia. To date, we have yet to ever use Magnitsky authorities against America's chief regional rival in the Middle East, the Islamic Republic of Iran. So there are things the administration is doing in terms of deed that it is not able to echo in terms of rhetoric. And that, I think, is just, of course, just a political problem. And call me old-fashioned, but I think some of these domestic issues should stop at water's edge.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very good point.
Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.